Good evening. Welcome to the William S. Paley Festival. My name is Ron Simon. I'm in from New York, television and radio curator. And the Paley Festival has always been one of the centerpieces of the museum. We've been doing it now for 23 years. We've done over 300 events. And the nice thing is most of the events are on videotape. They're part of our collection, so you can go and sort of see what the creative process was of a given series. We saluted the Golden Girls way back in the late 80s, and now we're going to salute them tonight. So it really shows just the development of programming. And so I encourage you to come to the museum. We have two locations. New York, we're in mid-Manhattan, and in Los Angeles, you all know, we're at 465 North Beverly Drive. And we not only have great seminars, but we also have a collection of 140,000 programs. And you can look at some of Betty White's and Rue McClanahan's great work, and you can go back and just see their development as actresses. It's just exciting. But as I mentioned, when we first did The Golden Girls, it was a show that was in the top 10. It was winning all the awards. It had eventually won 10 Emmy Awards. And remarkably, all four of the lead actors won for The Golden Girls. And that certainly just tells you the acting style and the dynamism of the show. But now it's read very differently. There's a whole new generation discovering it. In fact, many people have seen Sex and the City and going to The Golden Girls in reverse. And Lifetime has been remarkable for showing it many times a day, and it's really encouraged this whole new audience to see different things in the show. And tonight we're also going to look at the impact of some of the writers who began on The Golden Girls and then went on to create some of the most innovative comedies and dramas on television. We have Mark Cherry, who was here last year, and actually for Desperate Housewives, and we now have that on DVD. It's in the lobby. We also have Mitch Hurwitz, obviously creator of Arrested Development. So you can see there's a lineage to the Golden Girls, and that's really exciting. The hallmark of the Paley Festival has always been to have the production team here and just show how this unique combination of talents come together and create a show. Now, it's my pleasure to introduce the people who will be part of our creative team tonight. I'll introduce them just by name in the beginning and then a little bit more after the screening of the pilot. So let me begin with the writers. And I mentioned him. He was here last year. And writer Mark Cherry. Writer Mitch Hurwitz. Writer James Val Lilly. Director Terry Hughes. Unfortunately, one of our actors is under the weather, and the doctor advised B. Arthur that she could not do the seminar. We really regret that she could not be here. But we do have two stalwarts here to talk about what it meant to be on the show. First off, Rue McClanahan. And Betty White. Executive producer Paul Younger-Witt. Now to introduce the screening, Susan Harris is the creator and executive producer of The Golden Girls. She began her career as a writer on such shows as Love American Style, All in the Family, and Maude, went on to create and executive produce such series as Faye, Soap, Benson, and Empty Nest. The museum also has an initiative called She Made It, where we look at the women who really have determined new ways in American programming. In our first class, Susan Harris is part of that. You could read more about her on our website, but it's great to have her in person. Please welcome Susan Harris.
Thank you. Hi, thank you for coming, everybody. I want you to know this is probably my basic nightmare, talking to 600 people. You drove here in traffic on Friday night, and you're going to expect to have a good time, and it's not going to be from me. Hopefully, we have some funny people here, and they can answer your questions and make it worthwhile for you, because I certainly won't. My tongue is sticking to my lips from the Xanax I took, and this is not good. Anyway, we're going to screen. See, you think I'm funny now? This is fear. This is not funny. Believe me. We're going to screen the pilot for you, which aired in 1985, and I know that because right before I came, I Googled myself to find out something about Golden Girls. It was 20 years ago, and now that I'm a Golden Girl, I have no recollection. So please don't ask me questions, because after the screening, we're going to have questions and answers, and you'll ask the questions, and they'll give the answers. And I hope you have a good time. Thanks for coming.
Now it's my pleasure to give a very short introduction to our panelists. First, let's begin with the writers. Mark Cherry was a writer-producer on the show. He went on to write and executive produce such series as The Five Mrs. Buchanans, The Crew, and Some of My Best Friends, before creating and executive producing Desperate Housewives, which we showed here last year. Please welcome Mark Cherry. Yes, right. Next up, Mitchell Hurwitz was a writer and story editor on the show. He went on to write for such series as The Ellen Show and The John Larroquette Show, before creating and executive producing Arrested Development. Please welcome Mitch Hurwitz. Hey, Mitch. James Vallerly was a writer and co-producer on the show. He went on to write and co-executive produce such series as The Gina Davis Show, My Wife and Kids, and Arrested Development. Please welcome James Vallerly. Now, representing the directing unit of Golden Girls, Terry Hughes directed 109 episodes of The Golden Girls and also served as co-executive producer on the show. He began his career as a director-producer on British television and has helped helm episodes of such shows as Friends, Third Rock from the Sun, and That 70s Show. Please welcome Terry Hughes. Now our two very distinguished actors. Rue McClanahan played man-hungry Southern Belle Blanche. In addition to starring in the series Mama's Family, she appeared on such shows as On the Family, Maude, Newhart, and Touched by an Angel. Please welcome Rue McClanahan. Betty White played the sweet but slow Rose. Her career included such feature roles in such series as Mama's Family, The Mary Tyler Moore Show, Boston Legal, and of course, The Betty White Show, and dozens of episodic guest appearances spanning most of the history of television. It's a pleasure to welcome Betty White. Paul Younger-Witt was the executive producer of the show. He produced and executive produced nearly 50 television movies and series, including the classic Brian song, The Partridge Family, Soap, Benson, Empty Nest, and Beauty and the Beast. Please welcome Paul Younger-Witt. Okay. And please welcome back Susan Harris. Well, as I mentioned before, we welcomed you in the late 80s, and Golden Girls is certainly one of the most popular shows, but now it's a phenomenon. Books are being written, it's discussed on the internet, it's being rediscovered by a generation. Just wondering, do you have any reasons for its renewed success over the last few years?
You're asking me?
Susan, Paul?
Well, I think it represents a family. And I think very often we find our families outside of our family. And it's very reassuring to have that. And I think that that's its appeal, besides the fact that we had the most extraordinary cast. I don't think... I don't think it would have happened without them. We got incredibly lucky, and we just hit gold. And we had an extraordinary staff of writers and director. It just all came together, and we were very, very lucky. And I think that's why it was so successful.
Paul?
Well, I think Susan's covered it. I think the primary fantasy in a lot of successful situation comedies is the family we always wanted, or the family we yearn for, especially when we're alone. And as was stated very clearly in the pilot, this was a coming together of women who were alone, were facing a certain age in which loneliness is the greatest fear, being alone. And it fulfills the wishes and hopes of a lot of people. And the show has had this extraordinary life in syndication. We get an incredible amount of mail, and it has a lot of meaning to a lot of people. So you don't always know what you're getting into. This has certainly been very fulfilling for all of us.
I'd like to ask Mark and Mitch, I mean, you have two, and James, you're working on two of the cult series right now, but certainly Golden Girls has that following as well. Could you just talk about how an audience can appreciate your show, but also look back on the Golden Girls?
I was hoping we would make this about us.
Yeah, let's make it about us.
And I'm so glad we did it so early in the show. You know, everyone else speak for themselves, but I feel like we are the beneficiaries of this. And you know, we all came to this, I think, in the same season, which was 5, maybe?
Mitch started in September
yeah.
of '89. I started in January 2nd, 1990, I remember, and then you started 4 weeks later.
Yeah,
so.
and it seems like, you know, all those things that you said and that Susan said do make something really special, but the thing that Susan couldn't say is that it was so brilliantly written. I mean, just seeing that again, it's completely contemporary, it's timeless.
It's timeless, and it was totally the template for almost every episode we did after that. You know, it was. I'm looking at this song, I'm going, it's all there. I'm embarrassed to say I've never seen the pilot before. That's why I was laughing my ass off. I've never seen it before. I just missed it. And it's a fabulous piece of writing. I mean, I know it sounds corny, but
we wish you a lot of luck with it.
We wish you a lot of luck.
This could be the one.
This could be it.
But it was the characters were so well formed, and I know that's certainly the case with your show too. It's like you look at that pilot, and it's all there, and what the actors brought to it, of course, you know. But it just like it was all crystallized at that moment.
The thing I was really impressed with is look at her getting that exposition out. She'll lose her job at the museum. Oh, boom! You know what Blanche does? It was like, you know, you found out the relationship of all the husbands. One was divorced, 2 were dead. I mean, you were just the exposition queen, getting out in a way that was just so subtle. I was like just completely jealous watching.
Yeah.
And I'll also say that
And to have an extra character in there that nobody ever saw again. That was the obligatory character that we have to cut for the network.
Exactly.
But history could have been so different. Betty, you originally read for the Blanche role. Could you talk about that when you first got the script?
Well, you get so many bad scripts, you know, that people say, here, read this, and you think, oh, dear God, deliver me. But we were all so excited when we read this script because it was so wonderful. And at any chance I get wherever I go, I talk about, we can act our, what was the technical expression you used? Our asses off.
Balls.
yeah.
It was asses for you, balls for B.
We can't save a bad show, but if it's on the page, you can. I mean, it really does. And what nobody realizes is, to this day, we're all over the world, and to this day, as was the case when we were on at that time, 70% of our mail comes from people under 25 years old. It's incredible. And I think the bottom line is, it's funny. Miss Harris, it's funny. No, you're funny.
And could you talk about reading for both Rose and Blanche in the initial pilot? Didn't you think about...
Well, I had come off of the Mary Tyler Moore show playing the neighborhood nymphomaniac, Sue Ann Nivens. Thank you. And so I was thrilled at Blanche. I thought that was wonderful. And then all of a sudden somebody said, well, no, it was Jay Sandrich in his genius. He said, if Betty plays another, Man Hungry, they're going to think it's Sue Ann revisited. So let's make her Rose. Well, I didn't know who Rose was. And then they went out and got a real neighborhood nymphomaniac to play but Susan said, well, Rose is somebody I like a lot. She's kind of a character that I really love. And Jay just put it in a capsule. He said, she never is sarcastic. She takes every word for the exact meaning of that word. She doesn't have any imagination. If you said I could eat a horse, she'd call the SPCA. It was one of those things. So I was thrilled to wind up with, and then this one took Blanche out into orbit where I never would have had the guts to go.
Rue, did you see the possibilities of Blanche immediately when you read the pilot?
When I read the pilot, I called my agent and I said, I knew this was a hit the minute it was delivered to my door. I could tell before I opened it. I just knew it. And then when I read it, I said, oh, I'm perfect for the role of Blanche. She said, well, they have Betty White in mind for that role. They want you to read Rose.
And she said, Betty who?
Well, that's what I did. That's what I did, yes. And I said, oh, well, I don't really have a handle on Rose, but I'll go do it. I want to be a part of this. So I was reading Rose for Jay Sandrich, obviously without my handle. And he said, I'm going to ask you to do something unorthodox. Will you go down the hallway and just look at the role of Blanche? I said, well, surely if I have to. So I came back very quickly, and he said, let me hear you read it, and I did. And then he said, thank you very much, and that was that. Then I was called in again, and this time Betty White was there. And she didn't have a clue yet about Blanche versus Rose. And he said, now, Rue, I'd like you to read Blanche, and Betty, I'd like you to read Rose. And she said, oh, okay. And they heard us read. He heard us read. They heard us read. And the next thing I know, I'm getting called by Susan Harris saying, is there anything you can do to get B. Arthur to do this show? Because we'd worked together on Maude. And I said, oh, I've been wanting to work with her again. I'll give her a call. I called B. And I said, what is the matter with you? This is the best script you're ever going to read. And she said, Rue. I'm not interested in doing Maude and Vivian meet Sue Ann Nivens. I said, no, it's the other way around. I'm playing the vamp. Betty's playing the nitwit. She said, oh, no, that's very interesting. And the next thing I know, the three of us have been called in to read for network. And we wowed them. Oh, what a happy day. What a happy day that was.
Oh, wasn't it? The fun of it was sitting around the table, where you read around the table with a lot of actors, and all of a sudden I'm sitting there with Rue and B, and you had to be very careful. When you'd read a line, you better be ready. You threw it over the net, and you better be ready because you were going to get it right back. That was the most exciting read-through I've ever sat through in my life.
Really?
Yes,
Because we were so good?
I was.
You got to have a good straight guy.
Terry, as a director, could you talk about the pilot, how it's at a template?
He's our 5th Golden Girl.
Would you elaborate on that, please? Might be a
I
lot
always
of
said-
confusion around here.
We would not have this same show if we didn't have our 5th Golden Girl
Thank
with
you very
us
much.
every week. We only got him for 4 years.
We love her.
Actually, I'm glad to have the opportunity to talk about the pilot because when I was living in London, I'd watch American television, I'd watch Mary Tyler Moore, and especially soap. I noticed the work of a certain person, and I said, God, if I had the opportunity to have that kind of material and those kind of actors, I'd like to think that's how I would do it. And I would check the credits all the time, and it was always the work of Jay Sandridge. And Jay did that pilot, which we saw, and he set a template, he set a rhythm and a pace and a dynamic, which I was very fortunate to be able to emulate. And I owe him a great debt of gratitude and probably a great deal of money, but he'll settle for the gratitude. So that's my response to seeing that pilot again. It was exactly what I used to watch and like so much.
But Jay Sandridge told me, I don't want to hear a Southern accent. And I said, but Susan Harris wrote this character to be more Blanche than Blanche Dubois. And he said, well, I don't want to hear a Southern accent. So I tried doing it with kind of a modified sort of Southern accent. And then when we got picked up, I remember being in your office, and I'd been thinking about how to play her and not play her Southern. And I thought, okay, so back in July, this was in March, I guess, that we did the pilot. In July, we got picked up, and I went in and I talked to, I guess it was you and Tony Thomas. And I said, okay, guys, I know I'm not supposed to do this with a Southern accent. I've got an idea. How about Mae West? And I remember you said, not do it with a Southern accent? Of course I want you to do it with a Southern accent. I said, oh, thank God, because I don't really know how to play it without a Southern accent.
So you
and
played
even a
Mae-
phone.
Mae Southwest.
So Jay Sandridge wasn't perfect, but he was really good.
Listen, just
He wanted Betty to do it with a Dutch accent. He was crazy.
Now, a question is, how did it get on the air? Obviously, it was a family had never been seen on television before. What was your negotiation with NBC that led to the pilot?
Tony and I had taken a meeting with another writer on another concept altogether, which we thought was terrific, and they didn't. And they being Warren Littlefield and Perry Simon, and they said, you know, we had our affiliates convention in Miami, and Selma Diamond and one of the other actresses on one of their series did this thing where they thought Miami Vice was Miami Nice, Doris Roberts, and it was Miami Nice, and it was very funny. Is there anything about like retired people in Miami? And the writer we were with said, well, I'm not interested in writing old women. He's been out of the business a long time. And I said, I know someone really well who could just knock this out of the park. And that's how it started.
And in terms of casting, was Estelle Getty in the mix in the beginning, or did you?
she was the first one hired.
We hadn't seen anyone that came close, and we had a lot of fabulous candidates for. No, we were pretty much decided on who we wanted for the other parts. I think the B. Arthur part was described in the script as a B. Arthur type pilot script. So we were very concerned, and Tony called from New York and said, I found her, I'm bringing her out. And a couple of days later, this little package walked into our offices, and it was done.
Perfect person.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Really perfect.
Yep.
Had you ever worked with her before, Betty or Rue?
What, dear?
Estelle Getty, had you ever worked with her before?
No, I didn't. And matter of fact, being a California type, and I don't get to New York that often, I had not even seen her in Torch Song Trilogy, which was her big hit on Broadway. Had you ever? Yes, yes.
I saw Torch Song in Los Angeles after she'd been touring for 4 years in it. And of course she had that part nailed. And I thought she brought the show to life. She really made it work for me. Only was in the third act. So when they cast her as Sophia, I thought they saw Torch Song Trilogy. They saw what I saw, and that's what I believed all these years. I didn't know.
Well, just go on believing it. It's a great story.
I've even told that.
It's never stopped her before. You know, whatever sounds good, she tells it as fact.
You see why we never had to write these.
Well, people think we just made those words up, Susan.
James alluded to the one character in the pilot, Coco the cook. Was he going to be a regular person? What happened to his role?
We didn't know what gold we had found with these ladies, and there was just no room for him. It was hard enough in the 23 minutes we had every week to tell a story and give them material. And I mean, we just had a wealth of riches, and we didn't want to deprive him, and so we cut him out for that reason. It wasn't fair. He was a good actor.
Oh, and it was heartbreaking because, you know, when you sweat out a pilot and you're so thrilled, and I think he was more as excited as all the rest of us, and then to discover that the part had been cut had to be, I had such guilt feelings about it, but so much of our interaction took place at that kitchen table, and it would have been altogether different had he been there. But to this day, there are people who see the pilot for the first time and say, was it because he was gay? So I always say he wasn't gay. Well, it gets into very complicated stuff, you know. And then along came Brokeback Mountain, so I don't have to explain anything.
Well, you know, we just didn't need 2 cooks. And obviously, Sophia was going to be the Italian cook. It was obvious after she'd been hired and we all started working together that I think the network saw that too. Don't need 2 cooks.
But that didn't make him feel any better.
No, no. Hey, that's the business.
Now I'd like to ask our writers, when did you join?
We were lucky. We got on, you know, much later. All of us came in on the 5th season, so we're just here really to pay homage. I just came here to get my pictures taken with the girls again. What we learned, you know, Mitch and I talk about this all the time, is most shows. It was my first real big, you know, sitcom, and most people when you start writing on a sitcom, sitcom, it really isn't all that funny sometimes. But, you kind of muddle on. If you could not write a joke, if B. Arthur or Betty or Rue could not get a laugh with your joke, you have written a bad joke. And that's what we learned on this. We learned, that's, what's not funny. And because, seriously, if they can't get a laugh with it, you have to go back to the drawing board. And these women were such pros. They were talking about their table reads. They were miraculous. When these women had those scripts in their hands and would read that material fresh on Monday morning, I get goosebumps thinking about it. It was just a phenomenal, phenomenal experience. And working with these women, professionals like, you've never ever worked with, and I never worked with again. It was a beautiful experience, and it taught me everything I know about comedy writing. Thank you.
Also, there was a great deal of trust that grew up between the writers and the actors and myself as a conduit between the two. And if something wasn't working on the stage, and I called up and said, this scene isn't working, you might want to look at it before a run-through, they didn't question, well, let us see it, which is what you usually hear, let us see it. Now they said, well, if you and the ladies can't make it work, we better start looking at it now. And that saved so much time, and that trust and that bond worked really well for us, I think.
I only got
many years.
one call once from Betty asking for a new line once. It wasn't even a new line. She goes, it was the mayor of St. Olaf. And she was like, in a real sweet, syrupy, hello, dear, it's Betty. Could I have a name for the mayor of St. Olaf? And I went, Handentil. Handentil. Mayor Hand... Well, she didn't like it either.
The thing I remember that was so extraordinary is that one time Mark Saucon, this was in during the ill-fated spin-off Golden Palace, our boss, Mark Saucon, went every once a year had an anniversary with his wife, I don't remember, and he would leave early. That was his one night he would leave early. And so it was a tape night, and Mitch and my ex-writing partner Jamie and I were left in charge, which was just terrifying. And so we had a line in a scene that wasn't working, and I remember I went down and I had a couple of options for a joke. And I said to Betty, here, well, we could do this one or this one, what do you think? And Betty White said, oh, honey, that's your job, you decide. It don't work that way on my show.
Elaborate.
My actors are more than happy to tell me which line they would like. But I remember Betty, after all her experience and with all her fame and awards and stuff, she was more than happy to let the writers decide, and I appreciated it so much, and I've always remembered that.
I'd like to ask Susan a question, if it's apocryphal. That I believe before I joined in the first few shows, there was a show that wasn't working quite well, and you were getting on a plane to go to New York, and you wrote a scene on the plane and phoned it back in, and that became the cheesecake scene. Is that
first cheesecake scene?
The first cheesecake scene, which is the same scene that we went and did at the Royal Variety Performance when we went over to
I
London.
did write a scene on a plane. I don't know if it was cheesecake, though.
No, it was the mirror.
Yeah, but it was all around the table with
Was
the
it the
cheesecake
mirror?
scene.
It was a cheesecake scene.
Yeah.
It's what
I
we came to
remember
call those cheesecake scenes.
The first show of the second season wasn't, and y'all were responsible, I'm so glad to say, it wasn't so funny as it needed to be.
I wrote that one.
Now, wait a minute. The one I'm talking about is when you came in and rewrote that second scene in the kitchen where we're talking about looking in the mirror.
That was the first season.
right.
That was the first season.
Oh, was that the first
It was
season?
before I got there.
So it was the second show of the first season? Is that what it was?
Yes,
Well,
I believe it
we
was.
did that sketch when we went to England. We did that same sketch when, always on your back, Blanche, because if you ever look down this way, everything falls.
She wrote it in about an hour and called it in or turned it in or something, and we had a second scene that was hilarious. I remember it being that one.
It was
Maybe
very
wasn't.
easy. I had looked in a mirror.
We're spending a lot of time
maybe.
talking about jokes and how funny the series was and still is. But what really distinguished our cast and our writing, as much as the jokes and being funny, was the legitimacy and the honesty and the reality that they brought to almost every episode, and the juxtapositions of some very serious stuff that we did over the years with the kind of comedy that these ladies were capable of doing. Making those turns is really difficult, both for performers and for writers, and that really distinguishes the Golden Girls as much as anything. And to that end, if I may, it's the only time I'll refer to notes, but we had so many remarkable writers, and when the series started, we had Susan, and Susan wrote a group of scripts and did in continuing years, but we also had Kathy Spear and Terry Grossman, who were our original showrunners under Susan, and Mort Nathan and Barry Finaro and Winifred Hervey and Christopher Lloyd, and Richard Vaxey, and Tracy Gamble, and later on Mark Sotkin, and
David Lloyd.
Chris Lloyd.
Chris Lloyd.
Chris,
Lloyd,
yes,
David,
the son.
David's son. Yeah.
That was another show, dog.
Yeah.
Yeah, we couldn't get David Lloyd. We tried.
I get my
He didn't like the
Lloyds
But they
material.
were both wonderful. And Mark Sotkin, and I think Gail Parent was with us for a while.
Gail Parent. Harold Lloyd was with us for a while.
And we had Jay to set the stage, but when we had some bumps along the way with various directors until Terry came,
Oh, boy.
and everything came together.
That's why I say he's the fifth.
So it was great work from a lot of people.
But you know what fascinates me is we're all over the world, and the mail we get so much mail from Finland and Bangladesh and Sri Lanka and
Fiji.
and
Fiji,
exactly.
yeah, they love us in
and
Fiji.
the fact that they can see these four old broads around the world.
Now, wait a minute.
And still get the humor, and it's just so phenomenal, and you can't do that without just incredible writers. Writers can do it. We can act ourselves silly, but you can't do it unless it's on that page.
I think the most heartwarming moment that I had on the show, well, it repeated itself on several occasions, but this was the kind of thing it was. Paul and Susan would take me aside, and they would say, "We just have to tell you, you are just the best one on this show." Yeah, really, they did. Susan would say, "You've gone so far beyond what I wrote. I never dreamed."
She did. She went so over the top.
It's about to get ugly.
Following up on Paul's point, could you, Betty and Rue, just recall your favorite dramatic and your favorite comedy moment from The Golden Girls? Is there one that sticks in your mind?
Hello?
Yeah.
Are you still speaking to me?
I-
I'm not speaking to you, but I mean, are you speaking to me? I still love the one that we did with the short person, and it was such a sweet story, without making fun of him. They milked it for every short joke you can possibly get. But there was a sweetness about it. I think that one sticks with me more than maybe any of the others. Not more. I mean, it's like, what's your favorite animal? I do anything with a leg on each corner. They're all my favorite.
My favorite comedy one was, I guess it was the last season, where I'm on the grand piano singing "I Want to Be Loved by You."
Oh, yes, on the piano.
Oh, I loved that thing.
Oh, it was wonderful. Do you talk about going over the top? And
Well, it was written that way.
That was one of my most thrilling moments. Jamie and I wrote that episode, and we were instructed to go work with Rue as she choreographed herself on the piano. And so she had a mic, and we just sat, and I thought we were actually going to help her, and she just kind of did stuff and made us laugh and kind of choreographed the whole thing herself, and it was complete rip-off of Michelle Pfeiffer and the Fabulous Baker Boys, and Rue did everything we wanted. And
Is that why you've believed all these years? I hired a choreographer.
Really?
And
You lied to me!
and got him to come in. I had just done a musical in Burbank that I'd written, and he had choreographed it, and he was terribly funny. So I got him to come in, and I told him what was needed, and he did that. And
I think now I'm remembering that a little bit. I think you showed it to us first. So that's what happened as you brought us in to look at the thing and stuff.
Okay.
But I do remember we got Kent Spornak, who was our stage manager. I don't know if you remember this. We had a bit where she had to get a microphone cord wrapped around an extra. And she had worked with Kent Spornak all week long so that when it came to time to do it, because it was very tricky timing.
Very.
We, at the last second, I don't know if it was you or the
No,
director.
I wasn't there then.
Yeah, it was, but someone said, you know, I don't trust an extra. We got to do Kent. So when you see that episode and you see the guy being choked by her microphone cord, that's our beloved Kent Spornak who's doing that moment there.
His last
After
appearance.
whom
Well, he
Dorothy
died
Spornak-
when she choked him.
Well, actually, he got into that as a fetish, and then he died.
He's a choker.
It's really
it's
sad.
a sad story. And I think that midget killed himself too.
Now, we actually have some family here. The guy, our assistant director, Lex Passers, is right there.
And Robert?
Robert Spina, our
Lex.
script supervisor.
Robert Spina.
Robert.
It was a script supervisor on every episode, I think. Were you, Robert?
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
Oh my gosh, how nice to almost see you again.
Can't say anything up here.
How do you look?
Well, it's Tom. I'm Tom Carpenter. Tom.
Is Carpenter?
Oh, yeah,
Hey!
Tom's stage manager, Tom Carpenter.
Tom!
Oh, Steve's over there too.
Give these guys a hand. They worked hard on our show.
And you know, when I would get the flu, I think I got it twice in those 7 years.
Both times when she didn't like a script, coincidentally.
Yeah.
Quentin.
Very peculiar.
I would come in and I would do the afternoon show, the 5 o'clock, and then they'd let me go home, and Kent Zbornak would play my part in the evening show. But of course, they didn't ever film him. They just filmed people talking.
Yeah, they did film him once.
Yeah.
And we
he had
aired
a
it.
love scene with Dick Gautier.
Yeah.
Right? Who was that? Barry Bostwick.
Barry Bostwick.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, and
About that one.
yeah, and it was a problem because we shot it in front of an audience, so we get the laugh track and everything. But he got giant laughs with everything. You know, oh, I love
Not
you
as
so
big
much.
as mine.
No. Well, it was different. It was different.
Well, sweetie, he didn't indicate, but other than that.
Since we've gone to the audience, I'm sure that the audience has many questions. So we invite you to ask your question. We'll bring a microphone down to you, and then you're welcome to talk to any of our panelists. How about right here, right in the middle, 5th row?
5th row, 23rd down.
First, I'd like to say growing up watching you guys was a complete pleasure. It taught me to be a better person and a good friend. My question is, and some of my friends are sharing this question, is that having such dynamic writers and characters, how did you guys find a balance between them so that no one person overshadowed each other?
How did the writers find the balance?
The writers and yourselves, because you're both really dynamic and entertaining, and when you've got so many powerful personalities, how did you meld that? Was it just natural, or did you have to
We just
work at
played it the way it was written.
The story would dictate the dynamics between the characters all the time. I mean, it was all the episodes were very story character driven. So therefore, the writers were obviously very aware when they were writing how to balance that. Sometimes somebody would have a showcase week and somebody would have less to do, but the balance was organic and very.
And also, this is where
Rarely, Terry, but because the thing, even at that time, the thing that I could never understand, where I have my deep respect for the writers, we were like 4 points on a compass. Our characters were so defined that they never overlapped. Blanche was Blanche, Rose was Rose, B was B, Sophia was Sophia, but I never ever saw a show that I can remember somebody was light in. Everybody had so much to do, and this is over 7 years. This isn't like doing a pilot and maybe a couple of episodes. I want to hear the answer to your question because it's the one I've been asking for 25 years.
I have a partial answer to that, actually. That this was Paul Witt and Tony Thomas, who really, Paul's here, Tony's not here tonight, but they are the parents of this thing as well, and they managed it on a very personal and a very creative level. And it's hard to define what that job is for people, except to say that they were the kind of master writers to me, in a way. They pushed us all, they managed this enterprise, they told us when things weren't good enough, you know, which was a lot.
Always in a nice way, too.
I didn't think it was that nice.
It was nice.
Really? Well, here's what, it started off where if a joke didn't work, they would write better.
Better.
Remember this?
Yeah, we could do better.
And then it got shortened to B.
Yeah.
You would just see them during a run-through write B. And then, when Mark Sotkin got in charge, he took the vowel sound out of it, as if it was too much effort. It was more effort than the joke deserved to say B, so he'd say, buh.
Yeah, you'd hand
it
your
was-
scene
it-
and
it
you
was
go,
this
yeah, see this show?
perversion
Buh.
of the system.
And you just went, okay,
Oh, it's a
I got a buh.
It was.
Buh.
But
And you know-
it drove us all, and not just with jokes, but with story and with the soul of this thing. I mean, that's where these guys lived, in the soul of it. And it's just a key part that needs to be.
But the other thing I was going to say to answer this question, I think there was also a very strong cognizance of, you know, we've done a lot of Ruth stories and a lot of Dorothy stories. Let's come up with something that's going to showcase Betty this week.
Exactly.
So we were very much aware of who got the A stories, who got the B stories, and when you needed to rotate it. And one time, and this is the first time I've ever told this story, one time we went for I think 5 or 6 or 7 episodes, and we hadn't done a Rose story. And Mark Socken was getting nervous, so he came in, and Jamie and I were writing the script, and he said, I'm concerned because we haven't had a good Rose A story for a while. So the episode you're writing, I want you, you know, and we said, well, it's Ruse, Ruse got the A story, Betty's just got a small B story. Make the title about Rose. Okay, and I'm thinking, you think that's going to fool Betty White? and Mark Socken didn't care, so that episode was, and that was the one where she did the boudoir photograph for Miles, and it was entitled Rose Portrait of a Woman. So that was our way to like just get under the
Really
radar
subtle.
for one more week and stuff. But the thing that I knew at the time that Mark, I was probably afraid of, I had seen Betty. Betty always said the parts were equal. I remember an episode where I counted and I wrote it. It was the episode that Rue was on the piano for. And I remember Betty had 13 lines. That's all she had the entire episode. And she never complained. And I was so impressed with that because I thought, you know, she just...
Betty.
The truth is the gals were all so professional and the show had been going on and they all felt so good about their stuff. And believe me when I tell you, in so many TV shows, you don't get that kind of professionalism, and it makes it so nice for the writers. And we really got
We
trained.
should get into this.
Yeah.
Really should.
Because I really think these women have mistreated you. These desperate housewives. I don't think.
No, I didn't mean them.
No, I want to talk about them.
No, they're
Who's the worst, Marcia?
It's got to be Martha. Because she buries it all. Sits on it.
So Susan, when you got started,
It's Harry, right?
You know, we weren't envious or jealous of each other. We all respected each other and thought each other was funny. And sometimes at the first read-through, many times at the first read-through on Monday for the new show, we would say, well, now Bea she never knew what was wrong, but she'd say, I don't know, there's just something wrong about that line. And Betty and I would say, don't you think that would be, I would say, don't you think that would be a better line coming out of Rose's mouth? And the writers would take notes and go back to work, and very often they listened to us because it was funny, but it wasn't me. And you did the same thing. Estelle would say anything you gave her to say.
Yep. Anything.
and then she'd ask for less words.
Yeah, less words. She's the only actress who ever asked for less. Less,
It really is
please.
a very simple answer, which is on most shows, there isn't the quality of dynamism and talent that we had. These 4 women were so extraordinary that we never wrote toward someone or away from someone. And so through the course of a year, it would balance itself. But on most shows, people emerge. That's the funny one, that's this one, that's that. And the shows start to be written that way. And that never happened in Golden Girls.
Nope.
We were all the funny one.
Yep.
All the good ones.
And I just want to, I think they made the writers funnier. I mean, I don't know any writer who did this show who didn't come out a better writer.
Absolutely.
You know?
But that was Paul and Tony too, and
was Paul and
Susan, of
Tony.
course. But that was it. You know, those lessons stayed with us. Those lessons in storytelling, which are really, I mean, certainly informed the show that I've been doing. I'm sure you have a similar experience.
Well, I wanted to get back to female ensemble. It was heaven for me. And when you start creating a show with all women, the Golden Girls was the perfect template because you had the emotional represented by Rose, the intellectual represented by Dorothy, and you had the sexual, the physical represented by Blanche, and then you had Joke Machine off to the side. and it was this kind of interesting template that a lot of people tried and failed with. I actually did a show called The Five Mrs. Buchanans, which was my first attempt at female ensemble coming out of Golden Girls, and I didn't do it so good. But Susan
One
had,
too many.
You know, there you go. Exactly, that was the problem.
An extra attribute.
But what Susan did was she set up this amazing template that you could really cover, you know, everyone. It's the most amazing show because if you look at structure, we did something that you're not really supposed to do in TV. We would break our stories, and at the beginning of the second act usually, there'd be a scene where there was no plot. You would just, four gals would sit around talking. You're not supposed to do that.
Well, that was the cheesecake scene. That's what grew out of that
That's
experience.
what,
You usually started with somebody saying, I couldn't sleep.
Yeah.
Then it would end with someone going, you should go talk to him.
The only point we ever came up with in all those cheesecakes.
But the
You know
thing
what?
that-
You're right. I am going to talk to
I'm
you.
going to talk to him. I'm going
Great.
to talk to him. I'm going to talk to him.
I'm glad we took
You know
these
what?
6
Yeah.
pages.
It seems to be the solution to all the problems. Why don't you talk about it?
And the thing that's so amazing about this, they were so talented and they would have these distinct points of view so that any topic, usually sexually related, they would have these interesting points of view and they were the funnest scenes to write. But the show would stop while the gals did their arias. And you don't get to see that on any other TV show because most casts can't handle it, but ours could.
May
I
just-
loved, go ahead.
excuse me, darling, go ahead.
No, go, I insist.
I was just going to,
They're like Chip and Dale.
I was just going to add a personal note on that. We got so comfortable around the table talking that when between scenes, we wouldn't go back to our dressing rooms. We'd just stay there and yak.
Yeah.
And on camera blocking day, I remember one day we were all sitting around and Rue said, I think I have to tell you, girls, I'm going to divorce my husband. But this was serious, this was confidential talk. And then all of a sudden she looked up and she said, oh my God, there's a live microphone over my head. She says, I haven't even told my mother. Sorry, Dave.
That became our act break for that episode.
Yeah.
if I recall. We used that footage.
Yeah, you should talk to him, I think is what we said.
I wish I knew which ones you all hadn't written. I wouldn't bring it up and make a point if you didn't write this one, but I don't know, so I'll tell it. The three of us, Estelle wasn't in the scene, we're sitting around talking about our first time. And did we have as Betty said, you know. And I said something like, are you kidding? Oh, many times, many times. And what about you, Rose? And she said, well, it was how many years or only after I married?
I waited
Like-
until I was married, that was the line.
Before I knew what made your eyes roll back in your head. And then B said, as far as I was concerned, it was over before I even got in the room. I thought that was a brilliant line.
That was the first, Susan.
No, that was Susan.
Oh,
That was the first year.
Yep.
And that's no reflection on you, Paul.
No. Susan did most of the orgasm material.
That was the word on Susan.
Paul, what was your first time like?
I always identified with Rue. You identified with me? It was over before you got in the room.
No,
Oh, no, I didn't say that.
you didn't say that was B.
Oh, many times, many times. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Next question, we have a question way back there. Yes.
Question is for the girls. If they did a contemporary rendition of the Golden Girls, not that they need one, but if they did, who would you want to play your character?
My God, nobody. If they did
I think Rue McClanahan could play Blanche, and I think Betty
who
White.
would want to play our character.
Well, Meryl Streep has been begging and begging. But I said, no, as long as I can walk, I'm going to be Rose. It's a question.
Okay, how about a question right over there, in the back, to the end?
Where?
Yes.
I just want to say you're probably in company with a lot of nerds like myself who we're living life, and I hang out with a lot of Golden Girl fans, and we'll just stop whatever we're doing and say, "Shady Pines, Ma," or some type of line. And I think we've probably come to know the scripts better than yourself because we watched the episode 20 times by now. So share your thoughts about the fans like that. And then also talk a little about the Golden Palace. I was able to see taping the episode where Rose was trying to save the dog from getting put down on the greyhounds. And I just have to say, I went to the restroom and Rue came out saying, "My God, it looks like it's going to rain." And I wish I would have gone up and said something to you then, but I didn't want you to think I was a stalker. So talk about those two thoughts, please.
Well, you were the one with the Greyhound.
Well, the Greyhound script, bless their dear hearts, they wrote a script saying about the retired Greyhounds and the people who try to adopt them and give them a better life from the life they had when they were racing. And we got really more, maybe I got the mail because I'm the animal freak, but they got so much reaction to that particular script. And to this day, all the Greyhound rescue people still hold it up as sort of that it did more good for their cause than anything else in the world, because it was written as a comedy, and it was written through the good-heartedness of trying to get the story across. But of course, Rose didn't know anything about it, so they had people explaining to Rose what happened to Greyhounds after their racing career was over. And to this day, I will pass along to everybody here the thanks that I have gotten year in and year out for that particular show.
And we tried to get animal shows done as often as we could. We didn't get nearly as many done as we wanted to.
I got to sleep with a pig. I mean, a real pig.
And we did the dolphin show, where they were catching tuna, I guess it was, and killing dolphins in nets, and we went down to the docks, and I got to sock a guy in the jaw. Boy, I liked that.
You know, speaking to the nerd question of nerd fans, I consider myself one. I was in college when Golden Girls premiered in 1985, and you know, 5 years later, I was writing on the show, so I was kind of living out, you know, every fan's fantasy. And you brought it up earlier. I came as a fan to the first Museum of Broadcasting Golden Girls thing. I sat in the audience, and I think I asked a question. And so it's the coolest thing about getting to write on the show is getting to have and meet and know the Golden Girls. And as cool as you would think they would be, they are. And I feel so fortunate. And the two stories I will tell about them, just to give you an indication of what they're like when the cameras are off. I think it was our first month working at the show, Jamie and I were messing around at the craft service table, and I said something just scathing to him. I insulted him. I got him really good on something, and he just got mad. And he threw a piece of bologna at me, and I moved, and it hit Betty White in the face.
Accident, sure.
And we were just mortified because we just started the show, and without missing a beat, Betty took the bologna off her face and went, "Do you know I'm a star?" I'm a goddamn star. And then she just laughed and walked away and went, "Oh, I just did shtick with Betty White." And Rue and Jamie and I, we went to a fundraiser. I don't know if you remember this, Rue. We went to a fundraiser for Bill Clinton at Ted Field's house, and they had this big, just elaborate thing set up. It was like, you know, half an acre. It was this huge thing, and there were all these tables. And Rue and Jamie and I had gone together. You know, you had to pay a lot of money to go. And when we got there, we found out we weren't sitting together. And we looked at all the tables, and what we noticed was there was one famous person per table. And Jamie said, "Oh, I think it's one celebrity per table." And Jamie and I looked at each other, and Jamie said, "Hey, maybe we can trade up." And Rue said, "Well, just for that, I hope you get stuck with Howie Mandel," and just walked off. And my one story, and I wish Bea was here because she doesn't know this happened. Jamie and I wrote some special jokes for Bea one time for a special appearance she was doing, and so we had to go to her house to deliver the jokes to her. And we get there and we deliver the jokes, and she liked them, and she was very complimentary, and so we were about to leave, and she goes, "Stay, have a drink." And we were like, "Oh, well, okay." And I don't drink. And I didn't have the nerve to tell B I didn't drink. So I think I said, "Oh, I'm fine," and she said, "What are you drinking?" So I said, "Well, I'll have what Jamie's having," and Jamie was having a gin and tonic. So for 15 minutes, we had a conversation where we both had glasses, and at specific times, I would just lower my glass under the table, and Jamie and I would exchange glasses, and he drank 2 gin and tonics in 15 minutes. And B couldn't understand why Jamie was having problems walking out of her home. And for years, I've always wanted to say that's how I was so in awe of B, but I didn't have the nerve to tell her we didn't, I don't drink. So Jamie and I just were good little fans, and we just pretended for her. So, those are my 3 stories. So.
Great. Question right over here. Go to this side.
3 great stories. B. Arthur never offered me a drink.
Hi. There were so many episodes that were topical, but I was wondering where the HIV episode came from. I thought it was so groundbreaking, and if anybody was nervous about that or how the network received it.
Paul, Richard and Tracy wrote that, and I remember you made them put in a serious, the B story was about an auction, because I remember Richard and Tracy, having meetings with you about that episode. You're trying to make sure it was serious on all fronts or had something meaningful going on.
Yeah, it was an episode that needed to be done. And we had gained the kind of recognition and power at the network and trust so that they knew we would handle it respectfully. There was no way to deny that this was an important issue that needed to be talked about, and this was really the perfect show to do it on. So they were very supportive.
What year was that?
I was just wondering.
That was season 5, so it was 72 hours. It was right after we started, so it was aired in February of '90.
No.
Yeah, it really was. Yeah.
I was a fan. When I started the show, Jamie and I would come in. This is kind of obnoxious. When Jamie and I started the show, and we had seen every episode, and Mark Sokin and Tom Whedon and Phil Lasker and Gail Parent, who were running the show, had all been writing on various different shows. And like a lot of people in TV, as we all know now, when you're actually running a TV show, you don't watch a lot of TV. The hours aren't good, and you just miss a lot. Jamie and I came in there, and we were instantly like, well, no, you can't do that story because they did that in season 2. And so we sort of became like kind of the guys holding the Bible a little bit when we came on, because we were actual fans who had seen everything, and I kept correcting backstory, and I went, no, that's not what our uncle in St. Olaf's named, or whatever the thing was. And so it was kind of fascinating, but to this day, because it was really my first big job, I remember absolutely. See, I can't watch reruns like y'all, because not only do I go, oh, there's the episode. I remember who said what to who in the writer's room, and what joke we lost, and all that stuff, because it's so firmly ingrained on my brain. But I remember 72 Hours. It was the first dramatic episode of television I had ever done, and it was a tough week trying to find that balance.
You weren't there the first year when the network was still censoring us. Just that first year, we couldn't say certain things, make certain jokes. Innocuous ones.
Really?
Yeah.
And they would make much more tasteless substitutions. I had to say one time that my cousin was having, she found out her husband was having an affair, and she shot him in the bejubies. And they wouldn't let me. NBC, was it? CBS?
ABC.
Wouldn't let me say bejubies. They thought that sounded dirty. And here's what they came back, the suggestion they gave. And so she got a gun and shot the cork off his jug.
Yeah. I just realized what bejubies were. I didn't even get that until just now.
I said, I won't say that. My father watches this show. And so we had to settle for shot him in the boxer shorts.
Yeah.
But it got to the point where they trusted our producers then to censor us themselves. And
Well, being the #1 show didn't hurt either for
Yeah.
a couple of years.
we didn't have any. Any trouble after?
No, I remember the first dirty joke I ever wrote because it was on Golden Girls, and I'd done a show featuring, my first show was called Homeroom, and it lasted 10 episodes, and it was about the comedy of black inner city school children, which I was perfect to write for.
Funny.
And so we had done a lot of just very, very tame stuff, and I got into Golden Girls. I remember the first sex cheesecake scene we had to write was about stories about catching your parents have sex. And we wrote the joke where Rose went, oh, I would have died if I'd walked in on my parents. And Dorothy goes, you never walked in on them? And Rose goes, well, once, but they were just playing leapfrog. And Mark Stockin, literally, when we handed the script in, he gave us a high five like, you've made it to the majors.
We'll go down to the front row right here, this gentleman.
First of all, I'd like to say you're all brilliant, obviously, but to the two girls, because you're the ones that we actually see on the shows. You guys were just when I'm having a bad day or when I'm upset, I watch the Golden Girls and I laugh and I feel like it makes my day. But I wanted to say that, and I have two questions. The first question is, how did you, Betty White, how did you learn all of those words you had to learn from St. Olaf? And the second question is, it's kind of more of a emotional type thing. Do you guys keep in touch with Estelle, and how is she doing?
We try to keep in touch. It's not easy to be in touch with her because she's usually out of touch. She doesn't know, when I call her from New York, she doesn't know who I am. And I was told by somebody that after you'd been to visit her 2-3 years ago, she said, after you'd left, she said to her caretaker, that was a nice woman.
But just recently I spoke, and it's like a blowing curtain. Some days are better than others. And Paul, her caretaker, said, would you like to speak to her? I said, really? And she came on the phone, and yes, oh, yes, Betty. And she put it together. So it
not the last time I spoke to her, but it was probably, as you say, one of her off days.
Some days good.
Well, I'm so glad to hear that.
But as far as those words are concerned, these dear monsters, they would read the newspapers, and every time somebody would visit from any one of the Nordic countries, she wasn't Norwegian, she was Scandinavian, and and they would get these 14-syllable words and names, and then we usually were sitting around the table. So now the camera is on you while you're reading these, and these other three girls were such a help. They would sit there and just stare at me, waiting for me to blow it. They knew that I couldn't get through.
And she never did.
Oh, yes, I did.
No, you
yes,
didn't.
I did.
You were a phenomenon with
But
this.
it was such fun.
But we used, the day was a very heavy work day. The days were a very heavy work day. We would come in the morning. Nobody ever sat and read the newspapers or was at the crafts. We would start in and work all the time. Everybody, each individual person was a stickler for getting it right, working it better and better. It was the best work ethic I've probably ever met on the show.
And we were all so in love with him that down the season, when he finally had to say that he was going to he had a movie that he couldn't turn down, and he had to sit down and tell the four of us that he was leaving the show. That had to be the hardest thing you ever did, Terry, because we weren't going to let him go.
It was.
I didn't even go to your going away party. I don't know if you missed me or not, but I was crying so hard. I got in my car and drove home. I wouldn't go. I wasn't going to say goodbye to you. And it still hurts my feelings.
We have time for two more questions. We have a gentleman here, and how about right down here?
Hi. From the show's beginning, one of its most vocal and fervent groups of fans was the gay community. And part of the reason, I think, might be because the show was so courageous in depicting gay characters at an early time in the 80s. Dorothy had a lesbian friend in the first season who developed a crush on Rose. Blanche had a gay brother. Do you think this is the reason why the gay community embraced the show so much? And how did you keep this in mind when you were creating episodes of that theme?
I asked a gay young man in Greenwich Village, several years ago. I live in New York now, and I said, tell me something. What is it that you gay guys like so much about Blanche? And he said, are you kidding? We all want to be her. I hadn't thought about that.
The most astonishing thing for me as a gay man is that when I saw the show, I just assumed it was going to be just the biggest old group of gay guys writing the show. And I remember my first day on that writing staff, I was so horrified because my writing partner and I were the only gay people in the show. And the very first day, around lunchtime, everyone talked about their favorite boxing matches. And I was so depressed because I thought, these people can't be doing this. And what was fascinating about the show is that they would write this dialogue. And it's funny, we had a joke about, the women made the filthiest jokes, and the joke was that we would put in the stage direction, and then they laugh like men. Because it was like they were having conversations that we hope our grandmothers aren't having. But the fascinating thing is you would just write what was a really great joke, and you put it in B. Arthur's mouth, and it comes out gay. Yep. I don't know how it happened. And for me, and I think for me, writing what it was is that anytime you have, gay men just appreciate women of a certain age.
Yeah.
Also, I think gay men like old ladies. For some, I don't know why, but they do. But what was fun was that on Saturday night, the gay bars would stop the music, and at 9 o'clock the show would come on. They'd all watch the show, and then 9:30 they'd turn it off, and they'd start the dancing again. We felt very honored about that. That was lovely.
I still can't watch a show without doing poppers.
He was hired to write the one-liners. Isn't that so?
Yes, I was a one-liner guy.
Punch-up guy.
I never wrote more than one line ever.
Here, a question right here.
I'm a dental hygienist, and Estelle was a patient of mine for many years. And she became a friend and would say to me, I may have trouble remembering my lines, but with all those denture jokes, tell them I had a full set of teeth. And she did. She would often talk about, in response to that, her gay following from the stage work she had done with Torch a Song Trilogy. And I just wanted to ask, has anyone ever commented that you had 4 main characters and at all times only 3 chairs at the kitchen table?
We did notice that, yes.
Yeah, there was a technical reason for that. It's purely a television camera trick. You can't, somebody would have to sit with their back to the camera if not. And it was always, and it was a bit like the school bus. You know, when you get on a school bus, you take a seat, you take that seat for the rest of your life. So it was that Dorothy was always in the middle seat. You were always on the right. And you
Rose and Blanche, that was they would switch, but
they would switch according to who had to get out of the room quickest for the punchline.
Right, that's right. And, but the old lady would pull the high chair up and sit on the high chair.
Right.
Yeah.
I sat on that high chair. That was a stool many times.
Yeah.
Many times.
But I always wondered if the technical reason you had B in the middle was because as long as B is in the middle, whenever Rose could say something stupid, it was.
Yeah.
Well, no.
You had that great. You couldn't have done the turn that way.
It wasn't a choice I made. It was an established thing by the time I get there, and I wouldn't dare break that rule. I wasn't going to say, B, would you mind sitting here? Because it wouldn't have worked.
And she could also hit Betty on the head with the newspaper.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it was perfect. It was,
right next.
I have to tell you, this is just so weird, but I have to do this. I do this for my friends. It's the only time this will ever be inappropriate in a public gathering. I can walk like B. Arthur.
thank you for not inviting us to those gatherings. Thank you very much.
It's a pleasure to welcome back the Golden
I
Girls.
think there's a
to the
lot of
UMass
people here who
Paley
can walk like
Festival.
B. Arthur.
It's a pleasure to have you back, and we really saw tonight that the Golden Girls is a template for so much of the best television comedy, and we really thank you for taking time to share the stories with us.
And I want to tell you something. I'm 2 hours later than you are because I was in Austin, Texas, and flew here. And I have to get up early in the morning and fly back to Austin, Texas.
Thank you, Rue.
Poor dude. So I've asked Terry to sign all my autographs for me. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Well, thank you again, guys, and we hope to have you back here soon.